Hi, my name is Quilliam, and in this video we're going to be talking about cadences. Cadences come at the end of either a phrase or an entire piece of music, and they are defined by a pair of chords that will either leave the piece or the phrase feeling nice and resolved and settled, or they'll leave the listener on a cliffhanger and leave them in suspense. The cadence of the piece purely refers to the two chords that make up the end of a phrase or an entire work. And it does not necessarily cover all of the other things that you might want to consider when arranging for something to end. When thinking about endings, you might also want to consider things like tone, texture, dynamics, repetition, and lots of other things as well. However, cadences are the building blocks of all these endings. We're going to explore the four main types of cadences today. There are lots of other types, and some pieces don't even have cadences. However, let's go through the four main ones that have been used for the last 250-300 years or more. The most common type of cadence is the perfect cadence, which uses chords 5 to 1. The cadence is the most conclusive and smooth of all the cadences. In the key of F, for example, chord 5 is C and chord 1 is F. C is 5 away from F and contains all the notes that we need to create a nice conclusive finale to a section or piece. The 5 chord, or the dominant chord, contains 3 notes, 2 of which actually surround the tonic note. So in our example we're in the key of F. The chord C, which is the dominant chord, has the notes E and G in its chord, which obviously alphabetically they are either side of F. Therefore in the C chord you've got both the E and the G right next to the F, both pointing towards the F, giving you a clear sense of direction. The 2 chords also contain the note C, which creates some nice consistency between the 2 chords, enhancing the link between them. Sometimes we can also add a 7th to our dominant chord. What this means is you take a note 7 away from the root of the 5 chord. There's a lot of numbers. So our dominant chord is C. So if we count alphabetically, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Now the B in the F major scale, don't forget we're in the key of F, it's actually a B flat, not a B natural. So we add the B flat into the 5 chord. This gives us a C7. Now the B flat is right next to the note A, and the note A is very much part of the F major chord. Therefore that extra B flat gives us yet another link between the 5 chord and the 1, with the B flat resolving downwards to the A. All of this combined creates a nice moment of tension and then release as you go from chord 5 to chord 1. This makes up the perfect cadence. It's worth noting that no matter whether you're in a major or minor key, chord 5 is always major, whereas 1 is flexible. This is because in both major and harmonic minor scales, the penultimate note in the scale is called the leading note, and it's always a semitone below the tonic. In the key of F major and F minor, the leading note is E. Therefore chord 5, which is a C chord in both F major and minor, is always a major chord because of that E. If there is an E flat in the scale, chord 5 is minor, but there rarely is an E flat, it's almost always E. The only time where you might expect to see an E flat is if you're in a mode rather than a key, where the leading note is different than what it is in major and minor scales. In some modes, the leading note is a tone away from the tonic rather than a semitone, which can lead to the use of minor dominant chords. The practice is most common in folk music as well as a lot of neoclassical music as well. However, it's really rare in the common practice period over the sort of last 250 years before the 20th century. Why don't we listen to an example? The end of this Beethoven symphony has about 12 million perfect cadences right at the end. Perfect cadences, of course, don't have to be as affirmatory and grand as that, though. Earlier pieces of music would just use the cadence once in a simple but similarly satisfying fashion. Another cadence that is deemed authentic is the Plagal cadence. Instead of 5-1, we now have 4-1, which is also known as the Amen cadence, as it is often used at the end of church music during prayer over the word Amen. 4-1 isn't as strong as 5-1, but it's still a great way to end a section or piece. Unlike with perfect cadences, the penultimate chord can either be major or minor, freely, regardless of what tonality the piece is in. The minor 4-1 cadence is particularly satisfying. To me, at least, the cadence is more relaxed, peaceful, and even melancholy at times. So far, we've been discussing just what you can call authentic cadences. This is where the cadence brings the piece or the section to a nice, wholesome and restful end or pause. However, inauthentic cadences can be used too. These are cadences that don't resolve. They don't go to the tonic chord. They'll go in another direction to leave the listener on a bit of a cliffhanger, as I said earlier. There are two main types. First of all, imperfect cadences. They are actually the second most common cadence after perfect, although they are rarely used to actually end a piece. Instead, phrases in the middle of a piece can often be left on an imperfect cadence. There's always a risk of having too many perfect cadences throughout a song, which not only keeps the listener in a feeling that the piece has ended before it actually has, but it also robs the ending of any grand finality that could be achieved through the use of 5-1 progression when it's actually time to end the piece. Therefore, it can be particularly nice to deliberately hold on the 5 chord during a piece until we get nearer to the end. For example, in the song that most ukulele players have encountered, 5'2", the 3 verses all end in a perfect cadence, except for verse 1, which goes back to chord 5 for its 8th bar, rather than staying on chord 1 like the other verses do. Verse 1 can be considered to have an imperfect cadence, whereas the others are perfect. Deceptive, false, or interrupted cadences are like perfect cadences, which are 5-1, except one is substituted for another chord, often chord 6. They're often approached in the same fashion as perfect cadences, and they sound like they'll finish at home, except they throw you off and go in a completely different direction. This is a less common cadence, but not that rare. It can be used to deceive the listener and betray any sense of finality, delaying the harmonic closure of a piece until later, if at all. The difference between this and the imperfect cadence, though, is that it deliberately sets you up for something that never comes, instead presenting you with something unexpected, whereas imperfect cadences is pretty clear upon approach to a cadence that the phrase will end on chord 5 due to its placement within a structure. So there we have it, those are the 4 main cadences. There are so many other types of cadences and even some sort of variations on the ones we've already looked at. However, this is a good starting point to experiment with trying out different cadences in both your compositions and your arrangements of songs as well. I'm releasing a second video later this week on something called the Picardy Third, or the Tierce de Picardy, which is a nice little extra bonus tip that you can apply when thinking about cadences. I'm going to do it in a separate video so that I don't bombard you with information right now. However, make sure you're subscribed so you catch my little extra bonus video coming in a few days. Furthermore, why don't you check out my website, matthewquilliam.co.uk, where you can find information on private one-to-one lessons with me, where I can teach you either online or in my home studios. I will learn your name and know you personally. I will be able to identify and critique your strengths and weaknesses, and be able to tailor-make a lesson plan that will enable you to play what you want to play. My lessons are at very competitive prices, so please go and check out my tuition page on my website. Alternatively, you can leave a tip at www.paypal.me/mquilliam, or you can join me on Patreon, where you can get little extra bonus videos, as well as these videos 2 weeks early, for just a small financial contribution. You'll also get a shout out in the credits of these videos too. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day.